Hello, it's Glenn from Dugout to Cardboard. Thanks for tuning in. Hey, today's episode is probably going to be a little bit of a lengthy one, but I want to dive into a hobby topic really for the first time. Most of my episodes so far have been centered around my collection and the building of my wall displays and my playing time as a youth going into high school and college and moving into the minor leagues. So this time I want to dive into a topic that's pretty common out there in the YouTube community, and it's grading. I'm going to try to stick to an agenda today. So first I'll hit a real quick background of my history and of collecting and where grading pops in. Then we'll move to my current grading philosophy as far as what my collection looks like and what I've got today. Then we'll talk about a few of the graded cards that I have today, show you some examples of those. Then we'll move into pros of grading, cons of grading, and then we'll talk about the companies that are players in the grading industry today. And then we'll finish with what cards should I grade out of my collection? What cards do you grade in your collections? So a little bit about the background. If you'll recall, I collected in the late 70s all the way through the decade of the 80s and then completely stopped. And grading was not a thing then. We did not have the opportunity to send cards off to get graded. So we just, used the Beckett magazines, had the 2 columns that were in the Beckett magazines, and used those to try to determine the value of cards. A lot of discussions between folks on trades and buying cards, one-on-one conversations to talk about the condition of a card. So just grading wasn't a thing then. So I totally left the hobby, did not follow the hobby at all until this past January 2025. Dove back into the hobby head first and came upon this grading phenomenon that was, has been alive and well for quite some time. Just again, I had not been engaged with it, so had to do a lot of catch up and had a lot of time watching content creators talk about grading. And to be honest with you, my head was spinning a little bit. Got lots of input, lots of opinions, and just seems like they're just all over the place in the companies and the pros and the cons. So, I've spent a lot of time this year trying to get caught up. I'm definitely not an expert by any means. I still have a lot to learn, but I wanted to do this episode to share my current thoughts and my current plans and some pros and cons that I've come up with, and then get some feedback from the viewers if I can. Second agenda item, my current grading philosophy. I have not sent any of my own cards in to get graded to this point. I do have some cards graded, but I've purchased them all. Again, just out of curiosity more than anything, to actually have one and hold one was pretty cool when I first bought one back in June of this past year. So just that's my current philosophy. I've not sent in any cards yet. I do want to come away from this video, hopefully with some input from some viewers, and maybe break that seal and send a card or two or a handful off to get graded. As far as the cards I have in my collection, I do have 14 graded cards. Again, nowhere near some of the counts that the people that grade a lot of their cards have. All those were purchased, as I mentioned, in this past year, 2025. I'm definitely not loyal to one grading company. You'll see I've got SGC. Here's an example of SGC graded Ernie Banks, 1962. I've got Beckett with Roberto Clemente, 1958. I've even got BCCG. Again, I was not even aware of what BCCG was at the time. Came to find out later that it was just kind of a spin-off from Beckett for lower value cards. Beckett Collectors, got the acronym here somewhere. Beckett Collectors Club Grading is what BCCG stands for. Thought this was a great deal on an 8. Come to find out later that the BCCGs are kind of artificially rated a little higher than what they really are. So anyway, got one of those. I've got CGC, yes, 1973 Goose Gossage. And I also have PSA, obviously the dominant player in the industry. Here's a 1974 Dave Winfield. So definitely give you a little bit of an example. Again, I don't have a lot, 14. That was just a sample of the 14 that I have. So that's where I stand today with the cards and what I've done as far as purchasing graded cards. I've not sent off any myself. So let's move into the pros of grading. I've got 4 pros of grading that I think are worth to talk about. I'm definitely not all-inclusive. There's probably things that I've not thought about. So again, this is just my initial thoughts. Obviously, the very first one, authentication and protection. Obviously, one of the main reasons to grade a card is to confirm that it is authentic. So making sure that the card is authentic is definitely a benefit of getting a card graded. You know, detecting any alterations. You know, one of the things I was pretty keen on as I was buying cards was if they were trimmed or not. Trimming's been around forever. That was even an issue back in the 80s. So, you know, just somebody trying to make a card look like it's in better condition by trimming off an edge or you know, one of the edges of the card to make it look more sharp. So, you know, one of the things I did when I got cards from eBay or you know, purchasing them off Facebook groups was measuring them right away as soon as I got them to make sure that they measured accurately and they weren't trimmed. I think I've only had one that I obtained that was pretty obviously trimmed. So I've been pretty lucky there, but obviously grading, that's one of the things they do for you. Sealing the card protection, obviously there's many ways to do that. The grading sealing is probably the most effective way, of course. You know, you've seen my collection. I've got a lot of top loaders. I've got a lot of one-touches. The one-touches to me do a great job. You know, I like the look and feel and the sturdiness of the one-touches. I'm not at too much of a fear of dropping them and the one-touches coming open and the card flying away. Obviously, it could happen, but I don't handle them all that often where that could be a possibility. So I labeled that first pro as kind of a, you know, moderate pro. Nothing that really stands out to me as a huge proponent in my eyes or a big, you know, something that doesn't mean a whole lot. So kind of right in the middle as a ranking of a pro. The second thing is it standardizes, you know, gives a third-party evaluation of the condition of the card. You know, this obviously comes into play when you're buying a card or selling a card. Now, again, I'm in the collecting mode right now. Definitely not planning on selling, so I'm in the collector mode. So it makes the, you know, less variation between, you know, the value determination between a buyer and a seller. So give some standardization there. Now, obviously, you're going to hear this one come up in the cons as well because of the subjectivity of the evaluation. But I think, you know, one of the pros, again, a moderate pro, is that third-party evaluation of the value and the standardization of what those values are. The third pro, which I think is a huge pro, is it can really increase the value of your cards if you get a good grade. I've got one example here that I'm going to show you. It's a 1978 Topps Eddie Murray. It's his rookie card. For those of you that collect cards of this era, this one is notoriously off-center, but this example here is pretty well centered. Now, it's not perfect, so I'm not saying this is a Gem Mint 10 by any means, but the corners are sharp, the edges are great, the picture itself is great color, centering is pretty good. So all that being said, you know, the difference, and I'm not saying anything you know, that the collectors don't know, but raw or ungraded is a better way to say it. Ungraded, the way I have this card, it's about a $12 card. But if I get that graded and it comes back a 5, which again, 5 is just an excellent rating from a card company, and I really think that's better than a 5, just my eyeball of it right now. But a 5 doubles that value from 12 up to $25. A 6 would be $35. A 7 would be worth $75. An 8 would be worth $200. A 9 would be worth $1,200. And if some off chance, again, it's not a Gem Mint 10, but a Gem Mint 10 in that card is $33,000 just recently sold. Well, not recently. March of 2023 sold at Golden Auctions for $33,000. So same card, just a different number on the top of it. Changes the value from, throw the 10 out, and even throw the 9 out. Changes the card value from a $12 card up to an 8 is a $200 card. So significant change in the value of the exact same card just by getting a number on it. So obviously that's a huge proponent to get cards graded if they're in good condition. So definitely a high value pro there. And the last pro that I've documented here is, the future disposition of the cards. One thing I've started thinking about a lot is not just how I enjoy these cards as I've gotten back into them here in 2025, but how easy or difficult is this collection going to turn out to be for my family to deal with, on down the line, hopefully a long time away, but at some point in time, there'll be some decisions to be made there. So there's lots of things that you can do to prepare for that. I'll reference Baseball Collector, another YouTube content creator. He's mentioned a few times where he's already documented, the directions for his family on what to do with the cards. He hasn't shared that, but he said that he's done that. So that's definitely something on my to-do list. There are companies out there you can go to help, disposition cards as well. Your friends or your community. Obviously, this YouTube community is one that hopefully will continue to grow over time with me, and maybe there'll be some contacts in the YouTube community that I can use in my directions for my family to deal with cards in the long term. But I think that's a huge proponent, getting cards graded. Obviously, I wouldn't grade every card in my collection. I've got 60,000 plus cards, but the valuable ones might be worth grading. And that way, there's less uncertainty of what the value of those cards are when and if that time in the future comes. Let's flip over and talk about the cons of grading. So one of the first cons I've got, again, I think this is a huge factor, is the cost to grade. There are obviously fees to grade cards. There's shipping fees as well on top of that. There's insurance to be paid to insure the cards as you're shipping them back and forth. The biggest cost that I see with grading cards is the opportunity cost that you're losing to get other cards, right? I'm a collector. I want more cards. So, throw out a $20 per card cost to grade and say I wanted to grade my top 50 cards that I think are very valuable, that could be even increased in more value. That's $1,000. Do I want to do that, or do I want to go fill my gap of a Jackie Robinson, a Mickey Mantle, and a Ted Williams? I could get all three of those cards. I could get a card of each of those three players for that same $1,000. So that's the opportunity cost that you're tossing away by grading and spending so much money on grading cards. And one of the main things you see in a lot of the videos is, gosh, I'm paying somebody to grade my card. I bought this card. This is my card. And I'm not even going to get into the upcharges that happen on very, very valuable cards just because I don't have any of those. And hopefully someday I will, but I'll probably buy those pre-graded. But, just that cost to get somebody's opinion on what the card condition is, when I feel like I've got a pretty good eye myself. And I'm sure most people agree with me that they can put a decent value or decent condition on a card, but we're paying somebody additional money to just give their opinion on the card. Which leads directly into the second con, which I think is another huge con, is that subjectivity that we talked about. We talked about in the pros that it gives good, it limits the variation. The number on the card has a certain value that goes with it, and it makes selling and buying a lot easier and less haggling. But the subjectivity of that number is what the con is. Most people have already seen a lot of those content creator videos that show, getting a card back from a company, cracking it out, sending it either back to the same company or sending it to a different company and getting a different grade on it. So, using that Eddie Murray card as the example, if I submitted that card to get graded and it came back a 6, that's a $35 card. If I cracked it out and sent it to somebody else and the other company came back and gave it a 7, that's a $75 card. So I mean, just that, again, these are minimal examples. You start talking about these large cards, these comma cards, I mean, you're talking about changes of values that can swing thousands and thousands of dollars by moving a number up or down. So, there's a lot out there. One of the biggest things that stood out to me was there was one in the video, they sent the same card to multiple companies. So it took them a long time to do this, obviously, with one of the cons coming up later, but they sent the same card to multiple companies. And one company came back and said it was altered and trimmed, so they didn't grade it. Or minimum size, I guess is the way they defined it. It didn't meet the minimum size requirements. They got that card back, sent it to another company. The second company did not acknowledge that it was not of minimum size. They actually put a grade on it. So something as black or white as that, being viewed differently between two companies, just really struck me as, wow, there really is a lot of subjectivity in this. One of the things with all the different companies that I want to talk about is the transparency. It's a hot topic in companies like PSA and SGC and CGC. They do not share any of the details. I believe I'm right about this. They don't share any details, obviously, on the label for sure, but I don't think you get any more details about the sub scores. So what did your corner score? What did your surface score? What did your edges score? What did your centering score? There are some, I think, like tag and degree for sure. I think HGA does as well, that share the not just the sub scores, but even a report from the specific grading effort. So you can really find out the details of what caused your card to get the score that it does. I think that's one of the biggest arguments with the bigger companies is you just get a number with no explanation of why the number is what the number is. So I think that would be a huge improvement. I don't know if that's going to be something that PSA implements in the future, but I think that would be very helpful and help all the collectors really understand the reasoning behind the grades. I think that would be very beneficial. So that's one of the huge cons I feel that the companies bring to the table with all this subjectivity. The third con, turnaround time. It's taken forever to get these cards back, especially from certain companies. That's not a huge deal breaker for me. Obviously, I'm a collector. I'm not a flipper that I want to get a card, send it in, get it graded, get it back, and sell it for profit. So turnaround time, it's a con for sure, but I don't think that's a deal breaker with my specific situation here. And then the last one is the risk and stress, which again, I think that's not a deal breaker for me either. There is a risk of shipping cards and losing cards in the mail, and just the stress of not having them for so much time. The value of my cards, again, I'm not talking about thousands of dollars worth of cards. I'm talking about hundreds, 200s at the most. So that's probably a low priority on my con list, but as you get more valuable cards, that definitely comes into play more and more. All right, so next item on the agenda is the companies that are involved, and I'm not going to list them all here, but obviously the big player is PSA. They dominate the market, and just in the last 6 months or so, maybe in the last year for sure, since I've returned to the hobby, two big news items was PSA buying SGC and also buying Beckett. So those were the top three players in the industry and now owned by one company. So obviously it's looking like a monopoly that's being run by PSA. Probably some good things and bad things about that as well. Won't get into that today. But, CGC is probably next in line. I showed you one of mine, the Goose Gossage card with CGC. And then there's some others. Tag brings in a little bit more of the AI component. And then HGA, they've got some color matched slabs. I'm getting tons of ads. I don't know if everybody else is getting tons of ads for Degree. Pretty inviting ads. They're running a lot of specials here at the end of the year to get cards graded for as low as I think $8 a card. So that's another option that's out there. What are others out there that you've used that you've been happy with? Would definitely love to hear about that. You know, probably the right move is a mixture of all those. You know, my take on the high level one sentence comments on all those, obviously PSA is the most value. It's going to return the most value, but it's a boring label. Every label looks the same. It's just got the red box, red outline around the white box. Doesn't strike me as very inventive there. SGC has the tuxedo, which seems to be pretty popular. I like that myself. It just gives a good background for the card. Beckett has the long history, right? We all grew up in the 70s and 80s and loved looking at the Beckett magazines. So that Beckett has the history of the card collection industry. CGC, I love CGC, that Goose Gossage card I've got. I think it's the most crystal clear case that I have. It stood out as being a lot more clear than the others that I have. So I really like the CGC look. I like the tag aspect of bringing AI into it. You know, there are certain things that ought to be not subjective, it ought to be objective. And AI can do that on maybe not all aspects of the card, but on many aspects of the card. Let's utilize all the technology that we have today. HGA is an interesting one. I love their color matched slabs. They match the color of their slab label with the card itself. So whatever dominant colors are on the card itself, the slab label is also contains those colors. I've always thought that was a unique approach. I don't have any of those cards, but I've always been intrigued by that. And as I mentioned, Degree is probably the last one on my list. Just looking at all their advertisements, as I said, another interesting option. So that's just a quick rundown. Again, not all inclusive by any means, but probably hits all the big hitters. The next agenda item is what cards to grade. This is just my thoughts, so looking for input here. I've got a lot more homework to do, I believe, but what I'm thinking of doing is, really doing a personal evaluation of, each of the cards that I feel like would be worth sending off to get graded. Obviously, looking at good condition cards in the vintage world, that can be a 3 or 4 or 5. Those would be great condition cards for the vintage cards. So looking at cards that I feel like could be better than 2, 3, or 4. I tell you what, Greg Morris Cards, I'll call them out and give them a shout out here on eBay. They label their cards based on what they think the grade would be. They use the low grade as kind of a 1 or a 2. They use very good to excellence as the 3, 4s. They use excellent to excellent mint as like the 5, 6, 7s, and then the near mints is like the 7, 8s, and 9s. So I think I've seen some videos where those qualifiers on their cards are pretty close to accurate, where people have bought their cards, sent them off, and got them graded, and the grades matched what the qualifiers from Greg Morris on the ungraded cards had predicted. So I'm trying to use a lot of the cards I've bought from Greg Morris. I have a lot of cards that I've bought from them. I'm trying to use those as kind of baselines for my eye as I go through and look at other cards to see, how they compare to the qualifiers on certain cards that I have from Greg Morris. So I think I'm going to use that as a tool. And I don't have a grading kit as far as a centering tool. I need to buy one of those. I know they're inexpensive. I just need to get one to be able to measure and calculate the centering percentages on cards. So I know that's a big piece of it. But really just comparing that, my personal evaluation, just get a handful of cards, come up with what my best guess of the grade would be, and maybe have a range of a grade or 2. And then look at the value of that card at that grade and see if it's worth it. And maybe that's what I'm going to do. Again, looking for input to see what others have done as you've gotten into the foray of sending your own cards in to get graded. With vintage, again, vintage cards, I think it might be a little bit easier. Maybe I'll be proven wrong with that. I tell you, though, that with the modern cards, look at those at shows, and I can't tell the difference between an 8, 9, or a 10. You just can't visibly see the difference on most modern cards between, the 8s, 9s, and 10s. Again, vintages, you're never going to have 10s or 9s or even 8s. In most cases, 7's probably going to be your highest grade for a lot of the vintage cards. So I think it's a lot easier to tell, a 1, 2, or a 3 from a 5, 6, or a 7 in vintage. So I'm hoping that turns out to be true, and most of the cards that I'll be looking at getting graded will be a little bit easier for me to at least kind of guess what grade or educated guess on what the grade might be. I've got one last agenda item. Pretty unique little twist, but I wanted to get everybody's thoughts. I think I might be overthinking this one, but this channel is based on a few things. One's obviously my return to the hobby and my vintage collection that I'm trying to build up, but also my playing career story. So I played into the minor leagues, made it up to AA. I've got some cards of my own. You haven't seen all of these yet, but here's one from Princeton, West Virginia in the rookie leagues. The second one from Princeton, West Virginia in the rookie leagues. And then one from my AA season in Chattanooga. So should I send one of those in to get graded, or one of each of those in to get graded? I think I might be overthinking that. I think I might as well just go ahead and do that. I've got a lot of each of those, so again, doesn't have to be a great grade, but just I think it'd be pretty neat to have cards of myself in the format that comes back as a graded card. And again, maybe that would be one that I can just pick out my favorite look of the companies to see which ones I might grade those with. But anyway, thought I'd toss that out there to see what everybody thought about if you had a card of yourself from the minor leagues, would you send it in to get graded? Obviously, it's not going to be very valuable. I think I can get those cards for, on eBay for $1 or $2 right now, so they're very low value cards, but I'm not looking to add value to them, but just from a historical and posterity perspective, would that be a cool thing to do? So love to hear your thoughts. Appreciate the time today. I know this is a little bit longer video. Again, my first dive into a hobby topic, but I'm going to pin a few questions down in the comments below. Would love to get your input and get some interaction back and forth with others' experiences of getting into the grading side of the industry, and what you've done and what you've been happy with, and maybe some things that you haven't been happy with, and hope to learn from others. So thanks for tuning in today, and look forward to seeing you next time on Dug Out the Cardboard.